Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. The Hamas attack on Israel and its unarmed civilians on October 7 was the deadliest day for Jews anywhere in the world since the Second World War. Since then, the Israeli offensive against Hamas based in Gaza has also become the deadliest of the 5 Israel-Gaza wars for both sides. The total death toll has now crossed 4,000 after killing of over 2,700 Gazans and 1,400 Israelis since the attack. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on his second visit to Tel Aviv since then, and now US President Joe Biden is also set to land in Israel on Wednesday. Meanwhile, reports say a 2,000-strong US Marine Rapid Response Force is headed to the waters off the coast of Israel, and the Pentagon is preparing American troops for a potential deployment to the country, escalating US's show of force in the region as it works to prevent the conflict between Israel and Hamas from widening any further. After Tel Aviv, Biden will then fly to Jordan for talks about accelerating humanitarian assistance to Gaza, where he will meet Jordan's King Abdullah, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. It is expected that some sort of corridor will be opened for aid or even to let Gazans out. And it is also expected that post-Biden's visit, Israel will launch its full-fledged operation on ground aimed at eliminating Hamas's leadership and, of course, to rescue those 199 hostages taken away by the terrorists. Will America back Israel on their ground offensive to the hilt? To what level will Israel continue to get the US support, given that this conflict has the potential to accelerate and expand very quickly? We'll take that question to our guest joining us in just a bit. First up, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel again, as I mentioned, and this is what he has said about the impending visit by the US President. First up, that the American President will reaffirm US's solidarity with Israel, that Biden will hear from Israel on what it needs to defend its people. Biden also hopes to hear from Israel on how they will conduct their operations on ground, that US-Israel have agreed to develop a plan to enable aid for Gazans, and this is something that could be announced potentially during Biden's visit, that Gardens will continue in a way that it doesn't affect Hamas. So while they will plan an offensive, while they will also plan an aid, the fact that Hamas has to be eliminated and Israel can do what it takes to do that is something that US is firmly behind Israel on. Meanwhile, Israel has the northern border to worry about as well. It is getting heated by the day, by the hour at the northern front amidst fears that Iran-backed Hezbollah might enter the war fully. Now, this is what both sides are saying, and as far as the words are concerned, there is certainly escalation. So, Israel has warned Iran, saying that do not test us in the north, with the Iranians responding that all possible options and scenarios are there for Hezbollah to take care of. Israel has also said, do not repeat your previous mistakes. To this, the Iranian response has been that they will not allow Zionist regime to take action in Gaza. Their supreme leader has said that Muslim and the resistant forces' patience could run out, and then nobody will have any control in what their actions could be. So that's a threat coming in. Israel has gone on to say that the price that you will pay will be much worse than in the past if the Iranians or the Hezbollah were to get involved. To that, the Iranian response has been that preemptive measure is imaginable in the coming hours. So this is also going to be one of the US's priorities, to keep these elements in the region in check. Let's also take a quick check at some of the successes that the Israeli forces have had as far as eliminating top Hamas operatives are concerned. Remember, on that, they have full US support and, of course, support of even some other countries. This is what they have managed so far. They're going to continue to plan this operation and even a ground offensive in days to come. Ali Qadi is one of the top officials or operatives. The Hamas commander behind the October 7 attack is what the IDF has announced, that he has finally been eliminated. So some set of sense of retribution or revenge for the Israelis. Zakaria Abu Mamar is head of Internal Relations Office of the Hamas that has also been reportedly killed. Bilal al-Qadra, commander of the Nukba Southern Khan Yunis Assault Company, is also one of the eliminated operatives. Mu'taz Eid, commander of Hamas Southern National Security District, and also In more operatives that have been killed, there is Jawad Abu Shumala, Hamas Minister of Economy, Mirad Abu Mirad, head of the Hamas aerial array in Gaza City. So, of course, Israel is firm in its pledge that it's going to completely dismantle Hamas, any of its operational capacities to never be able to mount such an attack again. Whether that's really possible or not, can they do this to an extent that there is no Hamas anywhere, given that many of their operatives, decision makers actually sit outside of Gaza, remains to be seen. But the big question ahead of US President Joe Biden's visit is this: will US back the Israeli ground offensive to the hilt, or to what extent? We'll take that to our guests in just a bit.
President Biden will again make clear, as he's done unequivocally since Hamas's slaughter of more than 1,400 people, including at least 30 Americans, that Israel has the right and indeed the duty to defend its people from Hamas and other terrorists and to prevent future attacks.
People are not very hopeful about how soon the normalcy will return in the city, but they do hope that probably it will take few weeks or few months before the situation could be as safe and secure that people who have fled from the city would be returning back to their home. Meanwhile, the entire city and the perimeter of the city has been taken over by the Israeli Defense Forces.
Hello, Moto.
So how much support will the US offer? There are reports of them even preparing a rapid response team of the course of Israel. US President Joe Biden is landing soon. Let's take that question to our guest joining us. Nadav Steinman is chairman of the board of the International Legal Forum, joining us from Jerusalem. Veena Sikri is a former Indian diplomat. Irina Zuckerman is national security and geopolitical analyst, joining us from New York. And Dawood Kutab is a Palestinian-American journalist. Given that there are a lot of questions, of course, on Israeli action on the civilian life in Gaza. But Irina, let me begin with you. What Antony Blinken has said, what Joe Biden has said in the past, do you believe that the Americans will back the Israeli ground offensive in Gaza to the hilt? Or will there be some conditions put to ensure that there is least civilian casualty or collateral?
From what I see, there have already been conditions put since Israel has been pushing off this offensive for a number of days now. And there has also been a lot of pressure on Israel, successful, I might add, to restore electricity and water to parts of Gaza, as well as to maintain access to humanitarian aid, such as basic provisions for the civilians. What that means has not been clearly defined, but there is an effort to balance humanitarian situation with the military action. Israel has taken a lot of time to allow civilians to remove themselves from the front of the attack, but the latest development has been that Hamas has been blocking many of them from leaving. So while a portion has been able to evacuate, hundreds of thousands of people have already left. Others are still essentially trapped. I believe that the Biden administration will continue to pressure Israel to do as much as possible to allow these people access. But at the end of the day, the military solution is not something that the Biden administration can control if Israel sees that the only way to eliminate the mid-level operatives who are hiding amongst the civilian population is to go door to door and to avoid more, and that it could actually save more lives than airstrikes
Okay.
that will happen.
Yes, and of course, as Anthony Blinken has said that there will be details that Joe Biden will seek as far as this ground operation is concerned. Nadav Steinman, I'm coming to you. What is the sense in Israel? Of course, U.S. has been unequivocal as far as the condemnation of Hamas is concerned. They've been unequivocal as far as their support is concerned. The fact that Joe Biden is making this extraordinary wartime visit to Israel in itself is a symbol of their friendship. But could there be some concerns that Israel will have to take along given this ground offensive, given just the sheer number of people that are there in Gaza? And how does the Israeli government seek to do this?
Shivani, thank you for the question. First, we have to remark how unprecedented it is for a U.S. president to come here in person, to set his feet on the soil in a place that could potentially be dangerous. Yesterday, we saw there were bomb threats in Jerusalem, where I live, where the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, every single member had to go into shelters. That was broadcast around the world. So there is risk here. We all feel safe, but nonetheless, you have to see the extent of which the president's actions have actually come and to strengthen the people here as well, to show the resolve. And it must be remembered that Israel and America have had very close ties for many, many years. 50 years ago, we speak about the Yom Kippur War, where America really did come to the rescue at a time of Israel's need. And the same is happening again, too, where Israel is firmly with the United States, and in both directions, where the United States is standing firmly with Israel, and the president has said that Israel has an obligation to defend itself, as well as the obligation to rid Hamas. Now, Hamas, you have to remember, is an organization that took control over Gaza by coup in 2007. They are not an elected government of the people. So Hamas is the effective control of the territory. They are perhaps in some respects the government of Gaza, and we are fighting the combatants of that government. So now is a war between two separate entities. This is who is Hamas except a terrorist organization controlling Gaza. The effect of what Israel must do as it has done in all times, is respect the international law, rules of war and engagement. But Hamas at the same time is breaking every single international rule with respect to its taking of hostages. I don't need to repeat all those things here. But from a rule of law perspective, from international law, Israel has always shown how it does respect the rule of law. There's issues of proportionality and what that means. But there was an article that was recently released by The Economist, which I urge everybody to see, that Israel is within its legal rights to do what it is doing, and it will continue to do so by acting in accordance with international law, as well as with the support of the United States.
Yes. What we are witnessing, though, is the fact that, the fact that there will be civilian casualties and collateral is being used against by many to suggest that Israel should not do what it is, as you are saying, legally bound to do to protect itself, its citizens, and of course to dismantle what is in everybody's confirmation a terrorist organization. Secondly, what is also interesting is that while Hamas has now released the first video of the hostages that is in their captivity, there is literally no pressure on Hamas leadership by the same pro-Palestinian people to release those hostages as also a way to de-escalate. Let me go across to Daud Kutab, who's joining us. Daud Kutab, don't you think that the responsibility for this chaos that has now been unleashed in Gaza is also on Hamas squarely? There is no point blaming Israel now after the kind of attack that was mounted against its unarmed civilians, because any country, not just Israel, would do what Israel is doing to dismantle Hamas. Hamas is known to make its operations from civilian areas, use civilians as shields. They are using hostages currently as shields, and they continue, as reports confirm, block civilians from even moving out of the areas that the Israeli forces want them to move out of. So who should be blamed for civilian casualties? Should it not be Hamas?
This is for me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, I think what is happening is that we're forgetting the context of the conflict and we're moving right into the current, although it's very sad and condemnable, but there is a context of 56 years of occupation, 75 years of Palestinian refugees, and 16 years of siege that Palestinians in Gaza have been under. Now, I think we need to have people who are serious about finding a solution to the conflict that is political and not military. And
But
that's
what is
where
the solution that is acceptable to Hamas? I understand what you're saying, but the solutions have come forward in the past. Israel has also unilaterally withdrawn from Gaza, only to be attacked repeatedly. Hamas has rejected the two-state solution. Surely the solution that Hamas has in mind, which is to quote-unquote liberate from the sea to the river, is not acceptable.
no, what you're saying is not well said. Hamas has said that the PLO is delegated to do the negotiations, and they're not against the Israelis agreeing to a two-state solution. What is happening is that Israel has put a siege on Gaza, has refused to allow Gaza to be free and the West Bank to be free, and at the same time they have been using the mosque, Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest mosque in Islam, to break the agreement, the status quo agreement, and allow Jewish extremists to pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque. That has angered a lot of Muslims around the world,
I
including
get that.
Hamas.
One second, sir. One second. We're stepping into very dangerous territory. While I accept and you are free to point out the grievances that the Palestinians may have, I will reiterate that this is not a justification for terrorist acts. This will not be allowed to be used as a justification for the slaughtering of 1,300 plus Israelis. That is not justified, whatever the grievances may be. And also, if the cause of the Palestinians is that we are separate from Hamas, then there cannot be no ifs and buts in associating with the actions of Hamas.
Well, first of all, I did not justify anything. I said I have to put.
No, you said there is a context of the siege
I
plus
said
everything else.
no.
The context is also not starting from 1947 alone. I can go back to context 3,000 years ago. But anyways, continue. I want to make one thing very clear. No context justifies terrorism.
If you want to listen to me, give me a chance. If you want to preach to me, I'll turn off.
Sure, sir. Go ahead.
What I'm saying is that we have a conflict that needs to be solved in a political way, not in a military way. We need to find political solution to the grievances. Whether you like it or not, whether you think it's you can explain it any way you want, but there is a conflict. There are 1,000 Palestinians in Israeli jail who have no charge, who are not being, they are in a way as hostages.
All right, just hold your thought.
At the bigger picture, and you cannot just keep arguing without listening to other people's point of view.
I'm listening to you, sir, and I will listen to you more. But if this conflict has happened now, it is because of that attack from Hamas. That also has to be acknowledged. I'll come back to all of our guests in just a bit. Sir, hold your thought. I'm going to give you some more time. I'm also going across to a special guest now joining us. Tammy Benheim is Consul General of Israel to South India. Tammy, thanks a lot for your time and speaking to CNN News 18. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel, and Joe Biden, U.S. President, is making an extraordinary wartime visit to Israel soon. Your thoughts on the support that the U.S. has offered to Israel at this time, and do you believe there will be unequivocal support to Israel's ground offensive as well?
Thank you very much for having me, first off. And yes, I think Nadav said before me, this is an unprecedented visit by a U.S. president. But the United States has been a strong supporter, an ardent supporter, our best ally since 1948 and when we have received independence. So his visit just goes to show how strong this allyship is and how they unequivocally stand by two things. One, the condemnation of this horrendous, horrible, barbaric terror attack. And secondly, of Israel's rights to defend itself, to defend everybody living in Israel and to defend Israel. And also just, he's coming tomorrow at 10 a.m., President Biden. Today, Chancellor Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, will be in Israel doing similar meetings and giving the same message we have heard from many countries in the world, including India, including France, including other countries who understand the responsibility of a government to defend its citizens, to free its hostages, and definitely sending this united front, this united message that we must stand together to fight terrorism.
There are a lot of questions on the Israeli offensive because of the civilian casualties it has already that have already taken place, and it is that are bound to happen when a ground offensive also escalates. What about those responsibilities on the Israeli government? The world is asking.
One, war is always painful. War is, always sad, always damaging, always takes a toll. This is a war. This is an attack we did not instigate. It was a surprise to us, like it was for the rest of the world, where Hamas terror organization with more than 1,000 terrorists came into Israel. And I must be very clear, this attack is continuing now as the two of us are speaking, because over 200 babies, children, women, invalids, the elderly, and people are being held hostage by Hamas. One. Two, they are still shooting rockets into Israel. And somebody spoke of Al-Aqsa Mosque and how holy it is to the religion of Islam. Jerusalem is also holy to Christianity and Judaism, but the Hamas terrorist organization is aiming rockets at Jerusalem. So if somebody doesn't care about the sanctity of holy places, it's this terrorist organization. And obviously, Israel does try to always respond to terror attacks, and it's not our first one, in a measured way. And maybe this is one of the issues we've had, because every time we've had attacks from Hamas terror organization, we've answered in a measured way. We didn't call a war like we did now. We didn't say very clearly like we are doing now. We're out to destroy them, to make sure it never happens again. But Hamas crossed I don't know if it's lines, because terror organizations don't have lines, but they have become ISIS. They have become the worst terror groups and terror organizations we've seen, with beheadings, with burning of lives, with brutalizing, with rape, with what they did on Saturday and what they're still doing today. So once all the lines are crossed, a country has to retaliate. And I think the steadfast support from the US, Germany, India, France, as I said, and friends in South America, Europe, and everywhere in the world just sends a very, very clear message.
I do want to ask you one more question about what Israel and other countries in the region can do. US is pushing for this, about what aid can get in without, of course, getting into the hands of Hamas, and how many people can possibly be taken out with some sort of assurances that they can come back. Do you think some sort of solution to that effect can be worked out?
Well, we're all hoping, all of us here who are regular people who want to live in safety and security and quiet are all wishing for the same thing. Discussions in the area are already going on. President Biden and Chancellor Schultz both said that they're meeting all the presidents and prime ministers in the area. They said they will discuss all the issues, freeing up the hostages, because there are also American hostages and German hostages, but also figuring out exactly what you said. We are all trying to figure out how to minimize the damage to the civilians in Gaza and how to not cause more. And by the way, Hamas stopped the water supply, just a short little thing, stopped the water supply to the people in Gaza because they took the solar from the desalination plant in Gaza and are using it in their tunnels. So Israel yesterday at 9 a.m. Israel time, 11:30 India time, opened the water supply from Israel to the civilians in Gaza. So we're very aware, we are the ones caring more for the population in Gaza than the Hamas terror organization is. And they've been controlling, somebody said, just to clear, since 2007, no Israeli forces have been, long-term in Gaza. No Israelis have been long-term in Gaza. It's totally under Hamas governor ruling, however you want to call it. And they've shown again and again that they care about their terror aim. They care about destroying Israel, not about the people in Gaza.
On that note, can I ask you a final question as well? There are, of course, those who continue to identify Israel as the occupier and Gaza as the occupied, Palestine as the occupied, and they feel that an attack like this was only coming because of the excesses of the Israeli forces, because Israel has continued to occupy more and more land that belongs to the Arab Palestinians. How do you respond to those charges against Israel?
There's been a political discussion for years, and Israel is in negotiations and not in negotiations, and the world is trying to broker a peace and figure out, and we're calling for direct negotiations for years between the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, and the Fatah party in the West Bank and Israel. Gaza, from 2005, no Israeli army, no Israeli control, no Israeli civilians. We dismantled Jewish temples, we dismantled Jewish burial grounds and got out of Gaza. And by the way, Hamas gained control of Gaza. It won part of the election. But you know what it did? It went and took Fatah political people and Fatah political supporters and threw them off roofs and killed them in order to gain control of Gaza. They threw Fatah out of the Gaza Strip. Fatah today in the West Bank and Hamas in the Gaza Strip, they're not partners. Hamas is not doing anything to benefit anybody except their one and only aim, to destroy Israel and to kill Jews and Israelis.
Okay, I leave it at that. Tammy Ben-Haim, Consul General of Israel to South India, thanks a lot for making time and speaking to us.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Let me go back across to our guests that continue to be with us. Veena Sikri, you heard what the Consul General of Israel has to say. It is a tough position for the Israelis to be in. But is it fair for anyone to expect that they will not retaliate with the brutest force after what has happened?
Look, first of all, I think the world has been completely shocked by the brutality and the bestiality of the Hamas assault on the Israeli citizens. And certainly our Prime Minister's statement immediately after the attack happened shows that we are firmly opposition against terrorism. There is no such thing as good terrorist or bad terrorist or root cause terrorist. Terrorism has to be condemned wherever it exists. And that is the only way to overcome it. And that is how we have always been proponents of a very strong international convention against terrorism, but it's stuck on the definition of terrorism. But I think the most important point right now is that the world recognizes that Hamas is a terrorist organization. And number two, Hamas does not represent the Palestinians. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu himself has said that Hamas does not represent the Palestinians. So as we know, even when President Joe Biden is now in Israel, he is going to Jordan and he's meeting the King of Jordan. He's meeting President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority, and he's meeting President al-Sisi of Egypt. So he is meeting all the players, and there's no question of Hamas having any role or any say anymore in the negotiations for the future of the Palestinians. So I think in this sense, it is very clear that as a terrorist organization, Hamas cannot continue to exist. And the people of the Gaza region, the people of the Gaza Strip, the Gazans, their interests are paramount, and of course, their safety, their security, their going down to the southern part of the Gaza Strip. All that is very important. So there should not be a loss of life of the Gazans, and they must have every facility so that they can later on recover their lives, which has been controlled by Hamas. And we know that Hamas has these 500 kilometers of tunnels where close to 200 or more hostages are being held. So I think Israel's top priority is to rescue those hostages and to consider their safety. But certainly the destruction of those tunnels after the hostages have been rescued, I mean, how can that be continued to exist?
Yeah.
And is what we have just heard about the Hamas cutting off water supply from the Gazans by using the desalination plant water for their tunnels. So this is a problem that has to be tackled face on, because if Hamas as a terrorist organization no longer continues to exist, I think the two-state solution between Israel and Palestinian just gets that much nearer. And I think Government of India's statement in support of a just and secure two-state solution between the Israelis and the Palestinians is a very firm and strong commitment, and that will get closer the moment the Hamas as a terrorist organization no longer continues to exist. And I think the kind of support that you were showing, that the Iranian statements and so on, but that's support for a terrorist organization. So that too has to be taken on board. That how can it be that you support a terrorist organization and then say they have been receiving money and they have been using the money to build the tunnel. They've been receiving weaponry. We know where that's coming from, and they've been using that now against civilians, and they have taken all these hostages and killed so many people in Israel. So this process has to stop. And then there has to be a solution between Israel and Palestinians for a just two-state solution.
Well, what that just two-state solution can be, given that it has failed for so many decades in the past, remains to be seen. And we'll also wait, of course, of what happens during Joe Biden's visit to Israel and post that visit, as the region prepares for a conflict that could rage on for some time and has the danger of expanding to other fronts as well. I do thank all of our guests for joining us. Now, all through the past 10 days, you've heard questions about exactly who this land belongs to. Of course, the Palestinians say that they are the rightful residents of the land, and Israel has been an illegal occupier over the last 70 years or so or more. Let me take you through a brief history, in fact, the long history of this land, and you can decide exactly who has rightful claim to this land. Is it only one party, or can more than one people who identify themselves as different religions or different cultures lay claim to the land which is the present-day land of Israel? So take a look at what this land has been through. First up, Jews have had an association with present-day Israel going back to 3,000 years. In fact, Jews have established over those 3,000 years 3 different sovereign states. 3 times when actually it was the Jews that had sovereign states in what is considered to be present-day Israel. Historically, this region was known as Canaan, and it was Israelite kingdoms that had control over this area, in fact, much of the area that is to be known as Israel today. There were, in fact, for many millennia ago, the kingdoms of Israel and Judea that were based in what we know as present-day Israel. Philistines, from where the term Palestine also by some accounts comes from, or where the reference to the Philistine is, actually came later and was established in the southern plain, which is towards the Mediterranean Sea and lower as where the Gaza Strip stands today. This Palestine term also was used for the first time much after the term Israel or Judea, which was around 5th century BC. And when the Babylonians conquered the land, the Jews had to leave this land, and multiple conquests have taken place of what is known as present-day Israel. So it was in 70 AD when Romans conquered Judea and Jews were exiled once again. So Jews have had to leave this land, come back several times. After the Romans, the area fell to the Byzantine Empire. Few centuries later, in 636, it was the invading Muslim armies from Arabia that took control over this land. And that's from where the Arab kingdom or the Islamic Caliphate was also established at one time. Since then, this land has seen many empires till the British took over. There's Alexander the Great, there's the Ottoman Empire, there's the Caliphate, there's of course ultimately till about 1947, the Britishers who were ruling this land, and it was the Britishers who handed over this land as Israel and Palestine in that 2-state formula. Remember, this land is also holy for both the Christians and the Arabs, who also have very deep connection as far as this land is concerned. But as this history shows, it is not just one set of people alone that can claim that we are the rightful owners or claimants to that land. And in fact, the Jew history predates that of Islam in this area. Let's also take a look at the changed phases of Israel and Palestine since the 20th century, because that's also what is portrayed in the media as Israel taking over more and more territory. So the first map here is from before 1947, which was under the Britishers. These are in white, the very few Jewish settlements, and of course, the one in green is considered to be the Palestinian land. In 1947, there was this UN partition plan which divided this area in a more equitable fashion. So the white is the Israeli land here now, which has increased, and the green is the Palestinian land. This was mandated by the UN. Now, a year after that, there were the Arab armies of various countries that actually invaded this area, invaded Israel, one can say. And these are the areas that they were continuing to occupy, the ones in darker green, and which was part of Israel as part of the UN partition plan. But Israel was attacked and the Arab armies took control of greater area. But by the end of that war, the Israelis managed to defeat the Arab armies, and they wrested more control of the land that was even given to them under the UN partition plan. So post that war is what the present day situation really came to about, because Israel won that war in 1948 and took over control. So there was only the Gaza Strip left and a little bit of that West Bank. The rest then belonged to Israel. And that is fundamentally what present day Israel looked like. There was the Gaza Strip, of course, densely populated, and the West Bank area, which was also in control of the Palestinians. And now, of course, Israel has said that the Gaza Strip or the region is never going to go back to what it used to look. Let's also tell you a little bit about the demography as far as both of these areas are concerned, at least as it stood before this attack by Hamas happened. So take a look at as far as the demography of Israel is concerned. Of course, Israel now has majority of the land, and they're saying they're not looking to occupy either Gaza or the West Bank. They're just going to, of course, dismantle Hamas. But Israel's population is about 93.6 lakhs. Out of that population, the Jews are 73.8%, and Muslims actually constitute 18% of that population, a fact that many may not know. Here's the breakup of the Palestinian population. It's about 50 lakhs if you combine the entire Palestinian population based in the Gaza Strip and parts of the West Bank. The Muslim population here is 99%, and there are just 1% Jews left as far as this land is concerned. With that, of course, we end this program on the Israel-Gaza conflict. We slip into a very short break. On the other side, we'll get you the biggest story of the day from India, where Supreme Court's judgment has refused to recognize same-sex marriages, as the court is not the one that can formulate that law or give that sanction. That's coming up in just a bit.
Hello, Moto.